The morning sun shone brightly over the Colorado Springs airport. The sky was clear and calm with only a few white clouds drifting lazily above. Inside the terminal, a young girl named Emily Parker, only 13 years old, held tightly to her mother's hand. Her backpack hung a little loose on her shoulders and her sketchbook peeked out from one of the side pockets. It was an important day for her. Emily was traveling with her mother to Washington, D.C., where her uncle lived. It was the first time she had flown since her father's passing 2 years ago. He had been a pilot in the United States Air Force, known among his team by his call sign, Falcon. To most people, that was just a nickname, but to Emily, it was everything. She still remembered sitting on her father's lap as a little girl, pretending to fly an airplane. He used to point out at the sky and say, "Remember, sweetheart, the sky is not a limit, it's home." That sentence had stayed in her heart. As she and her mother boarded the plane, the flight attendant smiled warmly and guided them to their seats. Emily's ticket read 17A, a window seat, her favorite. She pressed her small hand against the glass and looked at the long runway outside. The engines of the plane began to hum, and the sound made her heart race with both fear and excitement. Her mother, noticing her nervousness, placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You okay, Em?" Emily nodded and smiled. "Yeah, Mom, just remembering Dad." Her mother smiled softly, hiding her own emotion behind that calm expression. "He'd be proud of you, sweetheart." He really would. As the plane started to move, Emily opened her sketchbook. On the first page was a drawing she had made of her father's fighter jet, sleek, powerful, and graceful. On the second page, she had drawn 2 F-22 Raptors flying side by side. She whispered to herself, "Maybe Dad's watching over us from up there." The plane began to climb. The engines roared gently, and soon the city became small dots below them. Emily looked out, watching the clouds float past. The sunlight sparkled on the wings. Everything felt peaceful. But that peace didn't last long. About an hour into the flight, something unusual happened. The pilot's calm voice came over the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, please stay seated. We're experiencing a small technical issue with our communication system. There's no danger, but we'll keep you updated." The passengers looked at each other, a bit confused but not panicked. Emily noticed her mother frown slightly, though she didn't say anything. The plane continued flying smoothly, but inside the cockpit, the pilots were facing a serious problem. The radio connection with air traffic control had gone silent. They tried every backup channel, but nothing worked. The transponder began flashing irregularly, which could be read as an emergency signal by ground radar. Down at the NORAD base in Colorado, radar operators noticed the sudden silence and the strange signal from the commercial jet. Standard procedure required them to assume a possible emergency. Within moments, they scrambled 2 F-22 Raptor fighter jets from a nearby base to intercept the plane and assess the situation. High above the mountains, the 2 fighter jets cut through the thin air like silver arrows, their engines leaving faint trails behind. The pilots had no idea what they were flying into. They only knew that a commercial flight wasn't responding. Inside the passenger jet, Emily continued to draw quietly. But something outside caught her eye. Far away against the endless blue, she saw 2 small shiny dots. At first, she thought they were just distant planes. But as they got closer, she realized their shape was familiar, sleek, angular, powerful. Her heart skipped a beat. She pressed her forehead against the window, squinting. "Mom," she whispered, "look. Those are F-22 Raptors." Her mother leaned in to see but couldn't make out much. "Are you sure?" Emily nodded eagerly. "I'm sure. I've drawn them 100 times. That's the same jet Dad used to talk about." The F-22s approached the airliner from both sides, keeping a steady distance. To most passengers, they looked like distant stars glinting in the sunlight. But to Emily, it was like watching her father's spirit flying beside them. In the cockpit, the commercial pilots were calm but focused. They recognized the presence of the fighter jets and followed standard emergency hand signals. The F-22 pilot circled once, assessing the situation. Through visual signals, the airliner's crew confirmed there was no hijacking, just a radio failure. Still, procedure required constant observation until communication could be restored. A flight attendant, noticing the tension among some passengers, decided to walk down the aisle and speak softly to anyone who looked uneasy. When she reached Emily's row, she saw the girl staring outside with wide, fascinated eyes. "Sweetheart," the attendant said kindly, Everything's all right. The pilots are just talking to the jets out there. Emily looked up. I know. They're F-22 Raptors. The attendant blinked in surprise. You know about those? Emily nodded proudly. My dad was an Air Force pilot. His call sign was Falcon. He used to fly missions with jets like those. The attendant smiled politely but didn't realize the weight of what Emily had just said. She thanked her and continued toward the front. But a few minutes later, the same attendant returned looking more thoughtful. She crouched beside Emily's seat. Hey, sweetie. The captain asked if anyone here has any aviation or military communication experience. You mentioned your dad was a pilot. Could you tell me his name? Emily hesitated. She didn't want to cause a scene. But she saw the curiosity and seriousness in the woman's eyes. So she quietly said, Captain Daniel Parker, call sign Falcon. The attendant froze for a moment. She repeated the name softly, then quickly stood up and went toward the cockpit. Emily's mother gave her a worried look. Emily, what did you say to her? I just told her dad's name, Emily whispered. Sweetheart, her mother began. But before she could say more, the captain made a small announcement. His voice was calm but carried a strange emotion. Ladies and gentlemen, we're continuing our flight safely. Everything is under control. Please remain seated and enjoy the view. To the young lady in seat 17A, thank you. Emily's mother looked at her in confusion, but Emily just blinked, unsure what that meant. She looked back out the window. Outside, one of the F-22s had moved closer, close enough that she could almost see the pilot's helmet through the tinted glass. Then something extraordinary happened. The fighter jet slowly tilted its wings side to side, a graceful gesture Emily recognized instantly. Her eyes filled with tears. That was the signal of respect, a silent salute used among pilots. She whispered to herself, he knows. They know who Dad was. The jet steadied itself again, flying beside them like a guardian angel in the sky. Meanwhile, inside the F-22 cockpit, the two fighter pilots had just received an encrypted message from command. The child on board is the daughter of Captain Daniel Falcon Parker. For a moment, both pilots were silent. One of them, Captain Rhodes, remembered Falcon, the man who had once risked his life to help another pilot land safely during a mid-air emergency. That mission had become a story told among pilots for years. Now, his daughter was in that passenger jet below, sitting quietly in seat 17A watching them fly. Back in the cabin, Emily couldn't take her eyes off the Raptor outside her window. It didn't feel scary anymore. It felt safe, like her dad was there guiding the wings of that jet. Her mother held her hand tightly, sensing the deep emotion even without understanding everything. Mom, Emily whispered softly, I think Dad's watching us right now. Her mother smiled faintly, her eyes glistening. I think so too, sweetheart. Minutes passed, then half an hour. The problem with the plane's communication slowly began to resolve. The static cleared, and the pilots reconnected with air traffic control. The emergency was officially over, but the F-22 stayed beside them for a little longer, as if they didn't want to leave yet. They flew gracefully on each side of the plane, wings shining in the sunlight. Emily waved at them through the window, and for a brief second, one of the Raptors tilted its wing again, a silent goodbye. When the F-22s finally pulled away, disappearing into the distance, Emily whispered, Goodbye, Falcons. Her mother leaned closer. Falcons? Emily smiled. There were two of them, but for a moment, it felt like there were three. The rest of the flight continued peacefully. Most passengers never realized what had happened in those quiet, intense minutes above the clouds. But for Emily, it was a moment she would never forget. She closed her sketchbook, placed it on her lap, and stared out at the endless blue. The same sky her father once called home. Somewhere far above, she believed, he was still flying, proud, watchful, and free. The air was calm again. The hum of the engine sounded softer now, almost like a lullaby after a storm. Passengers had settled back into their seats, talking quietly, reading or closing their eyes in relief. The tension that had filled the cabin earlier was fading away like a bad dream. But for Emily Parker, sitting in seat 17A, the world outside that small window had changed forever. She still couldn't stop thinking about what had just happened. Two F-22 Raptors had flown beside them, not as a threat but almost as protectors. And one of those pilots had dipped his wings, a gesture of honor that meant more than words ever could. Her mother noticed the faraway look in Emily's eyes. "You okay, sweetheart?" Emily turned toward her with a faint smile. "Yeah, Mom. I think Dad sent them." Her mother smiled sadly, brushing a strand of hair from Emily's face. Maybe he did. Maybe he did. Outside, the clouds looked peaceful again. The sunlight fell on the airplane's wing and it glowed golden in the afternoon sky. The captain's voice came through the speakers, calm and reassuring. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've re-established communication with air traffic control. Everything is fine now. We'll be landing in Washington, D.C. on schedule. Thank you for your patience." Applause filled the cabin. People smiled at one another, some letting out nervous laughter. For most of them, it was just an unusual flight story they would tell later. A day when fighter jets appeared beside a passenger plane. But for Emily, it felt like a message, a bridge between earth and sky that only she could understand. As the plane continued its journey east, Emily opened her sketchbook again. She turned to a new blank page and began to draw the scene she had just witnessed. 2 F-22s flying alongside their plane, one tilting its wings in salute. She added a small figure sitting at a window waving. Underneath, she wrote one simple word: "Thanks." Her mother watched her draw quietly. "That's beautiful, Em," Emily smiled. "I think Dad would have liked it." Time passed slowly, but the closer they got to D.C., the lighter Emily's heart felt. She didn't feel scared anymore. She felt proud. Proud to be her father's daughter. Proud of what he had stood for. And proud that even years after his passing, people still remembered his name. In the cockpit of one of the F-22s, Captain Rhodes, the lead pilot, was still thinking about that name too. The moment he heard Falcon, memories had flooded back. He had never personally flown with Captain Daniel Parker, but every pilot in his squadron knew the story. Falcon was the kind of pilot everyone respected, calm under pressure, brave and kind. Years ago, during a critical training flight, another jet had a mechanical issue mid-air. Falcon had stayed with that pilot until the very end, guiding him safely back to base even when his own aircraft began to malfunction. He hadn't made it home that day, but the other pilot had. That act of sacrifice had become a story told to every new cadet in the Air Force. To hear that, Falcon's daughter was on a commercial flight that they were escorting. It had shaken Rhodes in a way he didn't expect. He spoke softly into his helmet mic. "Command, this is Eagle 1. Permission to transmit a personal message through ATC relay once the aircraft lands." After a short pause, the response came back. "Approved, Eagle 1. Back on the passenger plane, the descent began. The land below started to appear. Small towns, green fields, and winding rivers shining in the sunlight. The passengers straightened their seats and fastened their belts. Emily looked out the window again, searching the horizon, hoping to see the Raptors one more time. But they were gone. Just the open sky remained. The wheels touched the runway smoothly, and the aircraft slowed down with a gentle rumble. Everyone clapped again, some out of habit, others out of genuine relief. The flight attendant smiled, walking down the aisle to thank the passengers for their cooperation. When they finally reached the gate, the doors opened and people began to stand, stretching and chatting excitedly about the jets outside. Emily and her mother stayed seated for a moment, waiting for the crowd to thin. Then the captain's voice came once more, but this time his tone carried a soft warmth. "Before we disembark, I'd like to pass along a special message received from one of the F-22 pilots who escorted us. This is for seat 17A. Everyone turned curiously toward Emily's row. Her cheeks flushed red and her mother looked surprised. The captain continued, reading the message slowly, word by word. "Tell the passenger in seat 17A, Falcon's legacy still flies with us. The sky remembers him." The cabin went silent. For a few seconds, nobody moved. Emily's eyes filled with tears. She lowered her head, smiling through them. Her mother placed a hand over her heart, whispering softly, "That's for you, and for your dad." As they left the plane, several passengers smiled at her, not knowing the whole story but sensing something special had happened. The flight attendants, too, gave her gentle looks of respect. At the gate, an Air Force officer in uniform stood waiting. He introduced himself kindly. "Ma'am, miss, I'm here on behalf of the escort pilots. They wanted to give something to Emily." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, carefully folded cloth. It was a flight patch with a falcon embroidered on it, the same emblem her father used to wear on his shoulder. Emily held it in her small hands, feeling the rough texture of the thread. This was Dad's? She asked softly. The officer smiled. Not the exact one, but it's from the same squadron. They wanted you to have it. Captain Rhodes sends his respects. Her mother wiped her eyes, whispering, "Thank you. Thank you so much." Emily looked up at the officer. "Can you tell them I said thank you too, and tell them I'll fly one day just like Dad?" The man smiled warmly. "I'll make sure they hear that." Outside the airport, the evening sky was painted in orange and pink. The air was calm, the kind of stillness that feels like peace after a long journey. Emily held the patch close to her chest. She didn't need to say anything. Her heart already knew what it meant. Her mother put an arm around her. "He's proud of you, you know." Emily nodded. "I know, Mom, I felt it up there." When they dipped their wings, I think that was him saying hello. They walked out of the terminal together, the city lights starting to glow in the distance. For most people, the flight would just become a story told over dinner. A strange day when fighter jets appeared beside an airliner. But for Emily, it was more than that. It was a sign that love never fades, that courage leaves footprints even in the clouds, and that heroes never truly disappear, they just keep flying higher. That night, at her uncle's house, Emily couldn't sleep right away. She lay awake staring at the small patch on her nightstand. The Falcon design shimmered softly under the lamp. She picked it up and turned it in her fingers. Tracing the shape of the bird with care, she whispered, "I'll make you proud. Dad, I'll fly one day too." Her mother peeked through the door and smiled when she saw Emily holding the patch. "Good night, sweetheart," she said softly. "Good night, Mom," Emily replied. "Good night, Dad." Years later, Emily would remember that flight as the day everything changed, not because of the fear or the malfunction, but because of what it awakened in her. The next morning, she started asking questions about flight schools, aeronautics, and how to become a pilot. Her mother watched her with both pride and tears, realizing that Emily had found her path, the same path her father once walked. Time went by, and Emily grew older. She studied hard, pushed herself, and carried that Falcon patch with her everywhere, a symbol of courage, of family, and of the bond between earth and sky. Whenever she faced doubt, she would look up at the sky and remember the moment when two jets flew beside her, strong, silent and shining, carrying her father's memory through the clouds. Because that day, she wasn't just a kid in seat 17A, she was the daughter of Falcon, and in the endless blue above, her father's spirit still soared, forever free, forever proud.